We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Heath B, and he has also sent pics. What are our thoughts on using 3 identical matching speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen rather than a purpose-built center speaker from the same series? Is it still worthwhile even if the center is very good? He was planning to buy the Veris Grand Center, but wonders if he should consider a 3rd matching speaker instead. Does having 2 rows of seats with a riser impact? The answer.
So on that second part, not too much. I mean, having the second row of seats, the vertical dispersion the vertical dispersion can be different with some brands' center speaker versus their bookshelf speaker. But in the case of AVRant that we're talking about here, not too much. The center has a tweeter above a mid-range driver, and then it just has a woofer and a passive radiator on either side of that little stack. The bookshelf speaker, of course, is just a tweeter above a woofer. So the vertical dispersion really isn't changing much there, and that's what you'd be worried about with a riser. Honestly, you were supposed to use 3 identical speakers across the front. That's how things were envisioned originally. If you go and look at like Digital Video Essentials from Joe Kane, they go through the history of that a bit, and it's like that's how it started. It was 3 speakers across the front.
I mean, the only reason that center channel speakers are generally aligned the way they are is because we used to sit them on the television. Most people sit them just underneath the flat screen TV now on some sort of shelf. I know mine is sitting in a purpose-built shelf under the TV. But yeah, 3 the same across is perfectly fine.
Yeah. So three of the same across is great. In a lot of cases, you'll get slightly better horizontal dispersion from the bookshelf speaker versus the center, simply because the center, being horizontal, has a wider front baffle, which means that the horizontal dispersion is a little bit narrower in most horizontal center speakers. It's not something I would worry about tremendously. But honestly, if the price of getting 3 bookshelf speakers is a little bit lower than getting 2 bookshelves and a center, and these are all going to be going behind an acoustically transparent screen anyway, absolutely, get the 3 bookshelf speakers, because that's kind of what you were supposed to have anyway.
Sort of, yeah. So yeah, in fact, having it behind a transparent screen is really the ideal reason to get that.
Absolutely,
you don't have to try to cram it up next to either the top or the bottom of the TV.
Yeah, that's where it was supposed to go. So just to remind folks, I'm going to have some photos in the video version of this podcast, but this was Heath, who had his unfinished basement. And so, just show some of those photos. He was the guy who had the water softener system and the sprinkler system in the little alcove where we think that he should turn that into a false wall back there, have his acoustically transparent screen, his speakers back there, amongst sort of some of that plumbing wiring. But we've dealt with all that in the past, but just to remind people who we're talking about. So yeah,
that's right. Okay, I see now the placement and all that. So speaking of his room, his contractor needs to know the placement of the screen on the false wall. How high off the ground should the 92-inch diagonal screen be to accommodate the 2 rows of seats? Eye/ear height is about 44 inches from the floor in the prime seat in the front row. And assuming Heath is going with our previous suggestions, he'll be sitting 8 to 8.5 feet from eyes to screen.
Yep. So, first of all, there is a handy-dandy site that Ray Coronado forwarded to us a little while back, so we'll have the link for that at avrant.com. But it's a place called DIYmovierooms.com, and there they have a riser height calculator. So it's a handy thing because it tells you, now this is assuming that you have people sitting in both the front row and the rear row, and if you want a completely unobstructed view from the rear row, right? So you're sitting in the rear row, you got people sitting in front of you, and you want to be able to see the entire screen, including the very, very bottom of the screen with no obstructions from the people sitting in front of you. It tells you how high that riser needs to be. So handy dandy little thing that you got there. But
does it also tell you what the tallest friend you can have is?
Well, you enter that. You enter what the head height is for the people sitting in the front row. So yeah, you might have to
bring over your tallest friend and sit them in the front row.
But I just wanted to help people who are working this out for themselves a little bit, because when we're talking about using this 16:9 aspect ratio screen, and you're viewing your movies, most of which are going to be 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio, and you're viewing them from your front row, and that's so you get that nice wide field of view. The reason we've been recommending that is because then if you want the smaller field of view for HD TV or video games or things like that, you have the very simple solution of just going and sitting in your back row. Right. So that negates the need to have a fancy 4-way masking system. Or if you were to start with the 2.35 to 1 screen and then just mask the two sides, then what do you do for those movies that have subtitles that show up below that 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio? Or what if you want to watch an IMAX feature or one of those movies that has switching aspect ratios like The Dark Knight does, right? Switches between 2.35 to 1 and 16:9. Suddenly you're projecting images above and below the physical screen. So that's why we've suggested you go with the 16:9, then you sit close enough to it, you have the field of view that you want. But when you're working out how tall the screen should be, we're assuming you're sitting in the front row watching a 2.35 to 1 movie. All right. So that actually means there's some portion of the screen above and below the physical screen, the 16:9 screen, some portion of the screen above and below the image that you're watching. So what I'm worried about is getting the top of that 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio image, the CinemaScope, super wide image. I want the top of that to be 15 degrees above my eyes when I'm sitting in the front row watching a CinemaScope movie. Then there's going to be, in this case with a 92-inch screen, there's going to be another 5.5 inches of physical screen above that point, and another 5.5 inches of physical screen below that 2.35 to 1 image. But I'm not worried about that being a bit higher, because if I'm watching an IMAX feature, I want it to be taller anyway.
True.
And if I'm watching,
it's supposed to be.
That's right. And if I'm watching HD TV and I want a smaller field of view, I'm sitting in the back row on a riser, so I'm up higher. So it doesn't matter if the top of the screen for 16:9 is a little bit higher. So that's my logic in figuring out where to put the top of the screen. So for Heath in particular, what that works out to is having the bottom edge of the 16:9 screen 30 inches off the ground. Now, he's sitting up a little bit higher. His front row is going to be on a little bit of a riser too, and then his back row is on a higher riser above that. So he's saying his eyes are going to be about 44 inches off the ground. Normally, they're about 36. If you just have a normal seat right on the floor, you're going to be about 36, but he's going to have a little riser for the front row as well. So he's going to have his eyes about 44 inches off the ground. That means get the bottom physical edge of the screen, the 16:9 screen, 30 inches off the ground in Heath's case. That'll work out really nicely. Now, don't forget, you have some frame thickness below the edge of the screen itself, right? The frame might be 3.5 inches thick, whatever it is.
You're talking about the top of the frame.
Yeah. So I'm
the very bottom edge of the 16:9
picture.
So
I'm talking about the screen itself, 30 inches off the ground. That should work really nicely for you, Heath. So
Right. And if he goes to that DIYmovierooms.com website, he can sort of verify your numbers, can't he?
That's right. He absolutely can.
He can
and
play
it'll
with
work
it a
out.
little bit.
I promise
All right.
you.
Cool. Sounds good for Heath. Well, I trust you, Rob. If Rob tells me numbers, those numbers are the God's honest truth. I'll believe him every day, all day. Never doubt you.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.